this next panel is all about aligning business with sustainable development goals, which I feel like every discussion we've had today is all about. But let me introduce these next three panelists. Mark Schneider is the CEO of Nestlé. Nomsa Daniels is the CEO of Graça Machel Trust. And Sunil Mittal is the chairman of the International Chamber of Commerce and the founder of Bharti Enterprises. I want to welcome all three of them here today. But Mark, why don't we start off with you talking a little bit about a discussion we were having at our table. And that is, how can companies that are committed to long-term values address hostile markets, address hostile investors, and some of the short-termism that is very prevalent in the markets today?
Yeah, look, it's a real important question. Two things I can offer. One is you need to be absolutely consistent between your underlying value creation model. So ours, for example, is really long-term focused. And then the investor story you tell. Don't attract the wrong people. Don't make false promises. Be consistent in your dividend policy and the way you articulate goals. And it's amazing how easy you could attract the wrong people. And again, you know, investors might pursue you even against your will, but at least don't attract them. Be consistent about what you do. So that's one. The second thing is stay true to what you really want to do on the sustainability goals. Stay true to the ones that really matter to you. So one of the things we're announcing here today is the expansion of our Nestlé Needs Youth initiative, where by the year 2030, we want to give 10 million people all over the entire value chain access to economic opportunities by increasing on-the-job training, honing entrepreneurial skills, and also increasing the level of agricultural knowledge. That is important to us. That is not corporate philanthropy. This is something that's near and dear to our heart because, on the one hand, as the world's largest food and beverage company, we rely on a steady, high-quality supply of agricultural resources. And on the other hand, as a fast-moving consumer goods company, we need consumers with spending power and purchasing power. And hence, it's easy to make that business case. It is not something that's an add-on or a bolt-on to our underlying business activities. And when you focus on those, it's easiest to make the case inside and outside the company why that needs to happen.
Is that front and center, or is that something that is kind of a second track for what you're doing just in terms of focusing on the company's operations?
It's clearly something that's very close to our core, and hence it was an easy commitment to make. It's also not a new one. We started inside the four walls of our company in 2014. We had tremendous experience with that. There's good payback on these projects, so it's an easy business case. Hence, we're now expanding it up and down the value chain.
And not to put too fine a point of it, but where you're talking about attracting the right investors, you're also talking about chasing off the wrong ones, right? There are some investors who you may not want around.
We're not chasing off anyone, but again, when it comes to telling the story,
hedge funds, activists, anybody?
We're not chasing off anyone, but again, consistency in the story is key.
Okay, Nomsa, why don't we talk a little bit about progress that can be made on the climate front, and maybe experiences you've had there, and what that might tell you about other potential areas of investment too.
Okay, our organization works at increasing women's participation in sectors that are critical for the economy. And we work in Africa across 20 countries. We have a network of women in agriculture, and one of the things that they're doing is looking at adopting climate-smart agricultural. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that was good.
They're looking at adopting climate-smart agricultural practices. So we're working with women-owned seed companies and women smallholder farmers, currently 2,000 of them, in promoting climate-smart agriculture. Linked to that,
there you go.
Linked to that really is sort of innovative financing, which is what we're discussing today. Through that initiative, we've been able to...
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Through that initiative, we've been able to work with a local bank to finance the buyback of the seeds using a partial guarantee. But we're also, one of the things we also track is innovative financing vehicles that promote women's economic empowerment. And we've talked about ESG today. What we would like to see is actually gender being incorporated as part of ESG, because after all, SDG 5 is about the promotion of gender equality. And just as we have now green bonds and there's mention of SDG bonds, there's a bank in Chile that has just issued a women's bond. And I know that the IFC is also currently working with a bank in the Middle East also to issue women's bonds. So for us, these are very interesting and creative ways of empowering women, because at the end of the day, I mean, the point is to impact people's lives and to change their lives in significant and measurable ways.
What happens, my guess would be that it impacts the family pretty greatly when women have access to these funds, when they are able to get microfinancing and other issues along this.
I mean, absolutely. There are numerous studies now that show that if you invest in women, it has a huge multiplier effect on their families, not just in, in education, in health, in economic opportunities. So it's critical that we increase investing in women and girls. And the example that you gave of Nestlé, I think, is also one to be lauded, because we're also looking at how do we promote women in the supply chains of companies. How do we increase economic opportunities through those kinds of initiatives? And you're absolutely right that it's not about corporate philanthropy. This is, at the end of the day, this will add to the bottom lines of many companies. So we would like to see those kinds of initiatives. And just lastly, Bloomberg has a gender equality index that they're also using now just to track the performance of companies. So I think there are many initiatives that are starting to emerge that are really throwing the spotlight on an area called gender lens investing, which we
And the demand you've seen for that as well. I mean, you talked about these women's bonds that are being issued in different places, but you think there'd be a huge demand for these issues if you could get more of them.
I think there'll be growing demand, certainly. Yeah. I mean, in Africa where we operate, it's still, we're still not seeing them, but we would like to certainly be at the forefront of promoting those kinds of initiatives and working with financial institutions and other entities who are willing to go that route.
Sunil, why don't we talk a little bit about the financial institutions and financial inclusion, getting people who have never been banked before. I think there were something like 500 million people between the years of 2011 and 2014 who were brought into the banking system for the first time. What role does technology play in something like that?
Well, clearly, the 500 million people that have come into the banking system or sub-banking system is only because of technology. So you're right, 500 million people have moved in from 2011 to 2014, have now the power to access financial services, which is so important for most of the SDGs that we talk about. Right. But equally, there are about 2 billion people out there who do not have any banking financial services available to them. However, the good news is out of them, 1 billion people have a mobile phone. And we're talking about this underserved, the low end of the market. So out of the 2 billion, 1 billion people have a mobile phone. And we all know now the power of mobile phone. Kenya has shown us the way. Safaricom has been leading the charge there. But in many other countries, including Nigeria now, Ghana, Nigeria, Benin, DRC, in all these countries, mobile money is taking deep roots now. People don't need to have a traditional bank branch that they need to access. In fact, in my own opinion, banks in the traditional form are in the danger of getting out of business completely. And I'm not talking about fancy fintech applications. I'm talking about basic financial services where you can transfer money back deep into rural areas. You can access money. You can have small micro loans. You can have micro insurance. All these are available now through mobile phone in a very secure way. And a very important part of the whole equation that is coming through is the digital micro biometric-based national identity system. India has shown the way now. 1 billion people in India now on the platform called Aadhaar, which is a national identity system. Very low cost, very high quality. India is saving $8 billion a year on that. You can walk into any place in India, and I mean any place. You're talking about millions of outlets. Place your thumb. In less than half a minute, you're done. You can subscribe to new phone services. You can open a bank account, and you walk away in less than a minute, either drawing your money or putting some money into the system. This is happening now.
Can you give us some of those clear examples? I know you were responsible for bringing the first mobile payment system into India. Tell us a little bit about that experience and what it meant for that population.
Yeah, it's taken us about 10 years to get the what we call a payment bank license for a mobile company. And it is only natural that the mobile companies should have been given this instrument. There are total 100,000 bank branches, about 110,000 ATMs in India. But my own company has 1.75 million outlets. And they should be used for financial inclusion and services. The banks, the traditional banks opposed giving us a license. Finally, I was happy under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, we got the licenses. 3 companies have got a license. We kicked off 6 months back. We are connecting more than 100,000 customers every day in rural India and villages. And we have already crossed 20 million customers in less than 6 months.
That's amazing. Mark, why don't we talk a little bit about some of the deals that Nestlé has done? I know you just made an investment in Blue Bottle Coffee. I believe that's the 4th deal you've looked at this year, or that you've completed this year. What's the calculus you use when you're trying to figure out a growth project versus a sustainable project, and how you size those things up?
Look, ideally, those two should not come at the expense of each other. So clearly, the fact that we're pursuing some of these transactions, it doesn't mean that somewhere in the Nestlé universe, a sustainability project got cut. I think there's a dramatic shift going on with today's consumer. There's a much greater emphasis on the nutritional benefit of food and drink. There's also, among millennial consumers, a much greater willingness to pay for quality and also to pay for a sustainable supply chain, for example, and adhering to some of the sustainability goals. So I think investing in that direction, I think especially that latest investment, Blue Bottle, is a good example. I mean, that customer group, we're talking super premium coffee, we're talking about an ultra clean supply chain, and yet, we're talking about something that people are really willing to spend on. And so I think that's the sweet spot for us going forward. I think that's also consistent with our past, and hence let's go more in that direction.
Is that something that varies country by country, like where you're willing to pay a premium for something like that, where they are really checking into it, they want to know that it's a clean supply chain along the way?
It does vary by country when it comes to this precise degree. When it comes to the overall direction, this is global by now. And I think, this is gathering steam as we speak.
So what are you doing just in terms of knowing that customers are looking for healthier, more nutritious food along the way? What are you doing to change the products that you're putting on the shelves?
I think we've been at it for a long time when it comes to our own underlying activities. So, this is not just limited to the latest acquisitions. I think we've been long known for creating shared value in the agricultural space. This is a company with a 151-year history. And I think we've been very early on committed to very sound long-term practices here. I think when it comes to stressing nutrition, health, and wellness, nutritional aspects of food, we're at it for 20 years now. So a lot of the internal development, a lot of the rules that need to be met for launching a new product have been geared in that direction. So it's not only M&A, it's really also the internal projects that we pursue.
You're talking about the sustainability, and those are obviously things that your customers care about, that people around the globe care about. But you also have to balance it with attacks on your image that come at the same time too. The New York Times yesterday had a page 1 story going after Nestlé and other companies, saying that people around the globe have gotten more obese. How do you kind of battle on that front too?
Look, just for the record, yes, of course, I'm aware of that piece of coverage. We were disappointed. I think it was a fairly long article. I could have written a much longer article about the good things that we bring to Brazil in all aspects, from supply chain to the consumer. And hence, I think it was a one-sided description. That happens. I'm proud of the good things we're doing that we're bringing to life every day.
Okay. On the sustainability front, do you feel like you get good traction for what you all are doing?
I think when it comes to our company, I feel really good about the level of commitment and, again, how it's not sort of the latest and greatest thing, but something that we have been pursuing for a long period of time. Overall, and building on the debate here today, if we really want to get global traction, we have to avoid the elephant in the room, and that is the huge free rider problem that's building up between financial return expectations on the one hand, and then a loose kind of system on sustainability on the other hand. What we need is commonly agreed metrics and principles when it comes to sustainability. Without that, you will always have that free rider problem. There's a reason why generally accepted accounting principles are called generally accepted. Okay, because you can compare one company and its performance to another, and there's a consequence if you don't follow those definitions. Unless we make progress in that direction, again, it's all down to good intentions, and we have those good intentions, But overall, for a global solution, that is not enough.
This is actually a conversation that came up at our table today, too, is how do you try and set some sort of standards like that? How do you get the money going there? And one of the conversations that was brought up is that, look, maybe you can get the sovereign wealth funds to agree that you have to meet these sustainability goals before they will put their money in. And someone at the table, I won't say who, said, yes, you have to go where the money is, and that's where the money is. Sunil, what do you think about an idea like that?
You know, International Chamber of Commerce, I'm currently the chairman of that, and we are delighted that we have been formally taken into the UN system. We are the first non-government entity. What's the job of a chamber like ICC? Is to define a new language, is to define a new code. And on our table also we were discussing, while we have the sustainability reports in all our companies, can we now pin ourselves down beyond just the green and environment issues to taking all the 17 SDGs? And every company which is responsible corporate citizen reporting progress in terms of what they are doing towards each one of those SDGs, whether it's gender equality, whether it's poverty eradication, whether it's education. And I think the International Chamber of Commerce is absolutely fit as an entity and a body with all research and all scholars at its command, and having the network in 150, 60 countries to pull together a common language and a code to ensure that people start to focus on this much more.
And frankly, as a consumer, that would be appreciated too. You have all kinds of commentary, or you can see that companies are doing X, Y, and Z, that they're calling them these things. If you had international standards, it would be nice to know what you're getting as a consumer along those lines too.
I also think that as civil society organizations, having a common language also makes it easier for us to monitor you know, commitments and track progress, and to use that to hold companies accountable, but also to hold our governments accountable.
And in terms of where we stand on this from the ICC perspective, how far along would something like that be? How difficult would it be?
It's not difficult at all. We are working with WTO. We are partners with G20, B20. Now we are formally in the UN system. I had the chance of speaking to the Secretary General Guterres in June. I was very encouraged the amount of ask that is being made of ICC to take a leading role in some of these areas. One of the parts where ICC is doing a great job is to bringing back business as a force for good. There has been too much of beating of the business by so many stakeholders that business is not fulfilling its responsibility, business is there only for profiting. And I must say, I'm a businessman myself, I'm an entrepreneur. I have with great dismay seen our value go down in the last 5 or 7 years. We have to demonstrate responsibility. We have to come up to certain standards. And ICC is very focused on this. And to my mind, there is no better organization than International Chamber of Commerce to take charge on this.
All right, as a closing note, I'll ask each of you what you would like to see happen in the next year, what progress and goals you'd like to see, and what you might need from other people in this room to get to those levels. And Nomsa, why don't we start with you?
I think just related to this discussion and a point that was made by the gentleman from MasterCard, he said he wanted to see, you know, greater trust. In our case, I think we would like to see really greater trust between civil society and the private sector, because in our part of the world, there's still a great deal of suspicion of business. There's still a lot of doubt that, you know, business is really contributing to the development agenda. And I think there is absolutely plenty of proof to show that business is a force for good. But if you can't convince civil society organizations to buy into that proposition and to buy into it through demonstrating, really in word and deed, that that is in fact the case, then we're going to continue to work against each other rather than working together.
Right. Mark?
Along the lines of the discussion, I think some sort of framework that puts some comparability to our efforts here, I think that's what's needed. Willing to help, but again, there's lots of players here. And when it comes to cooperating between business and government, who are we talking to? Which phone number should we call?
It'd be helpful to have the list right in front of you. Sunil, how about you?
Very clearly, neither private sector nor the public sector or the governments can do it alone. We need each other, and we need each other very badly. Yeah. We have to rely on light touch policy and regulations, but equally governments and the political leadership needs to lean and rely more and place more faith and trust in entrepreneurship, innovation, technology, and more importantly, the role of business. we create jobs, we create momentum, we provide the fuel in terms of taxes for all these social projects to be done. And yes, you have a role to play as a society, as an activist, to ensure that right companies are funded, right companies are seen by investors, and companies which are not doing a good job are called out.
I'd like to thank our three panelists today. Excellent conversation. I truly appreciate it. And I want to thank all of you. If you heard the Secretary General earlier today, he did make a point about how this is going to be a year-long commitment, a year-long work in progress to see what can actually happen. We'll be back here. I expect to see many of you back here a year from now, talking about what progress has been made towards these goals. I've heard really incredible conversations at these tables today with concrete ideas of things that can work towards these goals. And I just want to thank everyone here for your joining us today for this luncheon and for your participation. We really appreciate it. We hope to get the notes back from everyone from their tables so that we can kind of take a broader look at how this has worked out. But again, thank you to our panelists and thank you to all of you today.